I worked the closing shift at a high-end furniture gallery in a quiet part of Connecticut. It was a dream job for a college student, mostly just sitting in a silent, beautifully lit showroom while doing homework. But the silence of a 10,000 square foot store at night starts to play tricks on you. The shadows cast by the designer lamps look like people standing just out of sight, and every creak of the floorboards sounds like a footstep. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. My manager Diane had left at 6 p.m., leaving me alone until closing at 9. Around 8:15, the store phone rang. "Restoration Gallery, this is Mark speaking. How can I help you?" There was silence on the other end. Not the dead air of a telemarketer, but the distinct sound of heavy, rhythmic breathing. "Hello?" I asked. "Mark," a voice whispered. It was a man's voice, raspy and low. "The blue velvet sectional in the West Wing. It looks comfortable, doesn't it?" My stomach did a slow roll. The West Wing was the furthest part of the store from the front desk. It was tucked behind a series of partitions. I looked at the security monitors. The cameras were grainy, but the West Wing looked empty. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "You look tired, Mark. You should sit down. Maybe on the sectional. I'm watching you." I hung up immediately. My heart was thumping against my ribs. I told myself it was a prank, maybe one of my friends from campus messing with me. I checked the caller ID, private number. I spent the next 10 minutes staring at the monitors. Nothing moved. I tried to go back to my essay, but every time I looked up, the showroom felt smaller, more crowded. At 8:35, the phone rang again. I didn't want to answer, but store policy was strict. "Restoration Gallery. I like the red tie you wore last Thursday better," the voice said. "The gray one you have on tonight makes you look pale." I dropped the phone. I wasn't just being watched, I was being studied. Last Thursday, I had worked alone too. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed Diane, but it went straight to voicemail. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That a man was complimenting my ties? I decided to close early. I grabbed my keys and headed toward the back to shut off the main breakers. To get to the breaker room, I had to walk through the West Wing. The lights were dimmed to atmosphere levels. As I approached the blue sectional, I noticed something. A small white piece of paper was sitting on the center cushion. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. It was a Polaroid photo. The photo was taken from a high angle, looking down at the front desk where I had been sitting just 5 minutes ago. In the bottom corner of the frame, I could see the edge of a vent in the ceiling. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't grab my bag. I ran for the front doors, pushed through them, and sprinted to my car. As I fumbled with my keys, I looked back at the store's massive glass front. The ceiling tile above the front desk was being pushed aside. A man's face, pale, thin, and twisted into a manic grin, peered down into the empty space where I had been sitting seconds before. He held a long, silver utility knife in his teeth. I drove to the police station and told them everything. When they arrived at the store, the man was gone. They found a sleeping bag, several empty water bottles, and a collection of photos of me stashed in the crawl space above the ceiling. He had been living up there for at least 2 weeks. The police never found him. I quit that job the next morning and moved back in with my parents. I still can't sit in a room with a drop ceiling without staring at the tiles, waiting for one of them to move. I've worked as a bartender for 6 years, and I've seen every type of creep imaginable. But the scariest people aren't the ones who scream or get aggressive. They're the ones who are too nice. I was closing up a dive bar in rural Oregon. It was a Wednesday, about 2:15 a.m. The last of the regulars had stumbled out, and I was just wiping down the brass rails. The door opened, and a couple walked in. They looked like they belonged in a catalog. Mid-40s, well-dressed, looking very out of place for a place that smelled like stale beer and sawdust. "We're closed, folks," I said, not looking up. "Oh, please," the woman said. Her voice was like silk. "We just broke down a mile back. My husband's phone is dead, and mine is at 1%. Could we just use your landline to call a tow?" I looked at them. The husband gave a warm, tired smile. "I'm sorry to bother you, man. We're just trying to get to the motel in the next town." I felt bad. It was pouring rain outside. "Sure," I said, gesturing to the phone on the end of the bar. "Help yourself." The husband went to the phone while the woman sat at a stool. She started chatting. She asked about my life, how long I'd worked there, if I lived nearby. She was incredibly charismatic. I found myself telling her things I don't usually tell strangers, that I lived alone in the cabin 3 miles up the road, that I usually walked home on nice nights. "You have such a kind face," she said, leaning in. Her eyes were wide, almost unblinking. "Doesn't he have a kind face, Gary?" The husband hung up the phone and walked over. "Very kind. The tow truck is an hour out. Say, since you're closing anyway, could we buy you a drink for the trouble? Or maybe we could give you a lift home once the truck gets our car." "I'm good, thanks," I said, a small bell going off in my head. Something about the way they were both looking at me, like I was a piece of jewelry they were considering buying, made my skin crawl. "Don't be shy," Gary said. He stepped behind the bar. I bristled. "Hey man, you can't be back there. Out." Gary didn't move. He kept that same warm smile, but his hand went into his pocket. "We really think you should come with us. We have a beautiful home. You'd fit right in." The woman reached across the bar and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was insanely strong. "We've been looking for someone like you for a long time," she whispered. I didn't think. I grabbed the heavy glass soda siphon and smashed it onto the bar top, glass spraying everywhere. I shoved the woman back and bolted toward the back exit. I heard Gary's footsteps heavy behind me. I burst out the back door into the rain and ran into the woods. I didn't go to my cabin. I knew they'd find me there. I hid in a hollowed-out log and waited, shivering, as I watched their broken-down car, a black SUV, slowly cruise the perimeter of the bar with its lights off. They stayed for 2 hours. They sat in the parking lot, the two of them visible through the windshield, just staring at the bar. Eventually, they drove off. The next day, I checked the phone logs. Gary hadn't called a tow truck. He had dialed a number that didn't exist. When the police checked the security footage, they found that the SUV had been sitting in the shadows of the parking lot for 3 hours before they came inside. They weren't broken down. They were waiting for the bar to be empty. The police identified the SUV from the plates, but it had been reported stolen 2 days prior in California. To this day, I don't go into bars alone. I still think about that woman's grip on my wrist and the way she talked about me like I was an object to be collected. This happened to me when I was 20. I was driving from Phoenix to Vegas to visit some friends. It's a drive I'd done a dozen times, mostly through empty, soul-crushing desert. It was about 3 a.m., and my gas light had been on for 10 miles. I pulled into a dilapidated Texaco station. It was one of those places that looks like it hasn't been renovated since the 70s. One car was parked at the far pump, a beat-up white van with tinted windows. I got out, swiped my card, and started the pump. The night was deathly silent. No wind, no crickets, just the hum of the gas. A man stepped out of the van. He was tall, wearing a dirty hoodie and jeans. He didn't look at me. He just walked to the trash can near my pump and started rummaging through it. "Hey," he said, his back still to me. "You got a jump? My battery's shot." "Sorry, man," I said, my hand tightening on the pump handle. "I don't have cables." "I got cables," he said, turning around. He had a strange, jerky way of moving. "Just need your car. Bring it over to the van." My gut was screaming at me. "Don't move the car." "I'm really in a rush," I said. "I'll tell the guy inside to call you a service." "The guy inside is in the bathroom," the man said. He started walking toward me. "Just move the car. It'll take 2 seconds." That's when I noticed the van's side door. It was slid open just an inch, and in the reflection of my own car's window, I saw a second man crouching by the van's rear tire. He was holding something long and thin. It looked like a crowbar. I realized the dead battery was a lie. They wanted me to pull my car right up next to the van so they could block me in. "I'm good," I said, pulling the nozzle out of my tank even though it wasn't full. The man in the hoodie stopped. His face went from needy stranger to stone-cold predator in a heartbeat. He whistled. The side door of the van flew open. A third man jumped out. This one was wearing a balaclava and carrying a roll of silver duct tape. I dived into my car and slammed the locks.
The man in the hoodie grabbed my door handle and started shaking the car with insane strength. The guy with the crowbar smashed it into my passenger window. The glass didn't shatter. It was tinted and reinforced, but it spider-webbed. I threw the car into reverse. I didn't even look. I hit the man in the hoodie with my side mirror, sent him spinning, and then floored it in drive. I heard a loud pop, and my car started pulling to the left. They had managed to puncture my front tire with something. I didn't stop. I drove on a shredded tire, sparks flying, for 5 miles until I saw a highway patrolman parked in a median. The cops went back to the Texaco. The van was gone. They found the attendant in the back. He'd been zip-tied and gagged, but otherwise physically unharmed. He told the police that the men had been waiting for a solo traveler to pull in. They found 3 sets of handcuffs and a bottle of chloroform in the trash can the man had been rummaging through. I still have a small scar on my hand from where I gripped the steering wheel so hard my skin tore. Every time I see a white van at a gas station, my heart stops for a beat. I never let my tank get below half anymore.